One moment. All right. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Close-Up, where we interview real entrepreneurs with real stories to learn more about what owning a business is really like. Today, we're going to be talking to René Banglesdorf with the Aviation Collective to find out more about the winding road that has led her to where she is today. René is a repeat aviation industry founder, CEO, and board member who spurs on those in the industry to conquer challenges, live better lives, and make a lasting impact on aviation's future with a collaborative approach. René was recently selected from hundreds of candidates as a board member for the FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board, a huge honor, an FAA and congressional-facing body. She was additionally selected as the chair of the Communications and Legislative Engagement Committee. She's a member of Women in Aviation International, a member of the President's Council of the National Air Transportation Association, and is a board director at Wingform, a software platform that automates aircraft sales transactions. And I'm a huge fan. She's a bit of an inspiration to me as well. So welcome, René. Thank you for joining us.
Tracy, thank you so much for having me. You know I'm passionate about talking about aviation and about entrepreneurship. So this is the best lunch hour I could have.
That's awesome. So I introduced you in all your accolades, which was a shortened, abbreviated list. They were so long. But now why don't you tell us about you and your current venture with the Aviation Collective?
Yeah, going back just a little bit, I started in aircraft sales working for Gant Aviation about 21 years ago, doing some marketing for them. And then Kurt and I started Charlie Bravo Aviation together in 2008. And I served as the CEO of that company for 13 years. It's now a 15-year-old company. And during my tenure as the CEO of Charlie Bravo, I really began to notice that I needed to grow. And when you get that kind of uncomfortable, like, I know I need to do something different, but I'm not sure where to start, you begin looking for resources on how do I get myself to the next level? And one of the things that I found was business coaching. So I started paying a business coach to help me create scarier goals and formalize the way that I approached goal achievement so that I could achieve those goals. And in doing that, I went back and got my undergrad degree. I got my pilot's license. I got appointed to that board. I wrote a second book. I started a couple of initiatives with friends that were really exciting. And I realized how much I benefited from business coaching. So when my mentor and business coach asked me if I would come to join his team as a side hustle, I said, of course, I'd love to do that. And that began my journey into professional business coaching. And I did that with the team. It was called Michael Hyatt and Company at the time. It's now called Full Focus Coaching. And I got my coaching certification from them. And then in parallel to that, I was on that FAA board where we were discovering that the biggest deterrent to women joining and staying in the aviation industry was corporate culture. And I had been coaching on that for years outside of the aviation industry. And because of those two things, the need for corporate culture coaching and my experience in seeing it succeed in other industries, and my love and passion and connections in aviation, the Aviation Collective was born. So as a part of that company, I do corporate culture consulting or coaching for operators, for OEMs, and for other businesses within the aviation industry.
Very good. And your focus seems to be winning the talent war, right? You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And a couple of people have asked me about that. They're like, oh, so you're a recruiting firm? And I'm like, no, I'm a performance firm. So it's more about it's not about, oh, how do we hire the best people? It's how do we become the best company so that the best talent is attracted to us? And then the best talent stays. And then the best talent is engaged and they actively want to be promoted and see the success of the company as an integral part of that foundation. And so it's not really about pulling in the best talent, it's about attracting, retaining, and cultivating the best talent so we can really change the industry in a meaningful way.
That's awesome. That's a great goal. So how did you talked about Charlie Bravo and starting that and starting out with Gantt, but how did you become an entrepreneur? What made you take the entrepreneurial leap?
You know, I've always been excited about starting new things. And if you take the Strengths Finder test, one of my top strengths is ideation, which is really thinking up new ideas. And then I'm also a maximizer. So with this idea, what could I do with that? And so I've always liked exploring new things. Prior to starting Charlie Bravo, I actually had an organic cookie dough company, which if your jam is chocolate chip cookies, I don't recommend starting a cookie dough company because you eat all the profits. And so during that time, the cost of fuel went up, which means the cost of delivery went up, the cost of ingredients goes up, and we have pretty thin profit margins already. So I cut my entrepreneurial teeth on cookies, literally, which was not that great. But then Charlie Bravo was a fantastic company to do that with. And it's kind of silly to say this, but I think Kirk got tired of me coming in and innovating in the company. So me innovating in other areas was a better thing. So becoming a business coach or working on the board of Wingform, or now I'm on the board and in fact a fractional CEO for a company called ETHJets, which is a startup company in aviation and technology, which is really fun. So starting new things is really exciting for me. And because I have the systemization of the platform from which I coach, I can see success or enjoy success faster, and better and more purposefully now with starting or getting involved with new companies. Did that even answer your question, Tracy? I feel like I went off on a rabbit trail a little bit there.
No, it did. I mean, what made you become an entrepreneur? And that's just the love of new things. And I get that. I totally get that. I mean, I'm kind of an ideas person too. So, which I think, and we can maybe talk about this, but I think the downside to that, at least for me, is I can be guilty of chasing shiny objects. And so you have to figure out which of the shiny objects are worth pursuing and which are a distraction. Have you struggled with that?
Oh my gosh. I had such a huge breakthrough with this last year. Oh. So when I started the Aviation Collective, I had one idea. And then like 2 weeks later, I'd be like, oh, should we try this? 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 And I was chasing shiny objects within one business model. Mm-hmm. And I started beating myself up about this. Like, why can't I just pick one thing and pursue it? Like really stick with it and give it a chance to come to fruition. And I happened to go to a business coaching intensive during that time. And Michael was leading that. I'm still learning every day, but he talked about iterating. And I'm like, oh, that's the nice word for what I'm doing. I'm iterating. I'm not doing constant pivots. I'm not chasing shiny objects. I'm listening, I'm getting feedback, and then I'm turning around and pushing something else a little bit different out. And while it felt like I was having trouble landing, it's a little bit like flying an airplane until you're actually lined up to land correctly. And you can do a go around. And in fact, when you're learning how to fly, you have to practice go arounds, right? You practice aborting a landing, circling back around in the pattern, and coming back in where you set yourself up for success. So there's a certain amount of, is my shiny object lining up Or do I need to refocus before landing this thing? So I think giving yourself permission to iterate is a really good idea. However, I will give you this caveat on that. I kept going back to my original vision, which we already talked about. So all of my iterations lined up with that original vision, just like my landings line up with that stripe down the middle of the runway at the given airport where I'm intending to land. So I'm not thinking about landing in a field. I'm not thinking about landing on a river like Sully did. I still have my eyes on the landing spot. I'm just iterating or chasing shiny objects to get myself lined up for a proper landing.
So how do you keep your team up to speed and on board with all your iterations?
We do syncs every week. So we do and that's an opportunity to revisit our goals. So we set quarterly goals, and my iterations don't change outside of those quarterly goals, but I'll iterate quarter to quarter. So it's purposeful. And then we also do a weekly sync. So the weekly sync is, are we on track with this goal? Do we need to add something or subtract something within this goal to make sure that we're keeping this lined up? And then honestly, the sync is a little bit about them needing feedback from me. So if we're going through an email campaign or we're looking at an ad campaign, they can ask me there. We can change things there. And then they don't have to chase me down for answers throughout the week because I wear some different hats and do some different things.
Yeah.
So lots of communication. And honestly, we use Slack for our communication, and we can tag those things. And when we were first getting started, we had lots of review going on. We had a system within Slack, like, hey, Renee, you have a to-do in this, and you put a green check mark when you've completed it. So we use systems and structured communication to stay on track with that. And honestly, Tracy, I've had to give my team permission to call me on the carpet when I'm operating outside of that, or when I'm getting off track with the vision, or when I'm being too hard on myself. Yeah. Like, hey, Renee, we've succeeded in these 5 areas. Don't harp on that one. And that's a lot of give and take, right? I have to coach them through the same things when it's discouraging, because sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're just starting in a company, it's really easy to get discouraged. And so having a practice of, hey, let's start with what were our big wins last week is really important. And then where do we have room to grow? And being receptive to critical feedback is really important when you have a team.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think particularly small business owners, entrepreneurs that are going a million miles an hour, it's hard to just stop and take a minute and say, okay, we did something right. Let's celebrate our successes. Let's take a minute and say, yay. And then we'll deal with, because not everything's a success. But I think that's hard sometimes for people to do.
It can be really hard. I actually do it in a very systematic way. And it's called a full focus planner. It's actually sold by Full Focus, which is the company that I coached for. And the thing that I love most about this, and the most important piece of this planner for me, is the weekly preview. It's called the weekly preview. And in it, I celebrate my top wins for last week. I indicate what my big 3 goals were for the last week. And then I say, okay, what worked and what didn't work? I do an after action review. Did I hit my target? Did I not? What did I do that got me there? What did I do that made me fall short? It's called an after action review. And then what do I need to keep, improve, start, or stop to perform better next week? And some weeks I absolutely nail my big 3. I get them done in the first 2 days of the week. And I'm like soaring on that success for the rest of the week. And some weeks I'm like, I didn't even look at my big 3 this week. How did I derail myself? Oh, I didn't start by looking at my journal or my planner every morning. Let me get back on track with that. let me implement something new. Let me put a Post-it note with all my random things I need to do. And at the top of it, put my big three so that I'm looking at that every day. So I make adjustments to the way that I self-manage, which is really important to do if you're the boss.
Yeah. And I've learned I have to schedule it. And I figure out what those important things are, and I do them before I get into email. Once I open email, I'm done for the day. It just is such a time drain.
Yeah. I don't know if you do this, but I had to learn to do this because my email was a disaster when I first started paying attention to how I was spending my time. And one of the things that I did was turn off all my notifications. So I'm one of those type A firstborns that, like, if there are any little red dots on my phone, like I want to clear those out. So on my phone and on my computer, I get no red dots if there's a new email, because I don't need to be going, oh, there's an email. Oh, it's spam. Oh, there's an email. Oh, it's spam. Oh, there's an email. Oh, I better deal with that. And then it wasn't important. It was urgent, but it wasn't important. And I just wasted the 45 minutes that I had to look through a contract or record videos because the urgent kept popping up with a little red dot. So all of those are turned off on my computer. I minimize my inbox and I'll pull it up 2 or 3 times a day and go through all of the email that I need to go through. So I block my time for, I have from 12 to 1 today to get through as much email as I possibly can.
Yeah, I've done that. I've turned off notifications. I also silence my phone so it doesn't bing bong at me the whole time. But then my family's mad at me because I never answer the phone. But then I turn on the ringer so they can call me, and it just makes constant noise. It's just a constant distraction. So, okay, what are some notable experiences you've had as an entrepreneur? Highs, lows, it is a roller coaster.
It is a roller coaster. I'll talk about one that I think was really exciting. And I'm doing a helicopter project right now. So I've talked about this earlier today. When the Formula One race was coming to Austin, I was living in Austin at the time. And I had this brilliant idea that I should be the helicopter shuttle partner for the Formula One race. And I made some great connections, and my friend Lisa was working with me, and we went into CODA and we did this whole pitch to CODA, and like, it was fantastic. We got this contract. We worked with the FAA. We got helipads certified. We did 1,500 operations in 3 days. Now, the overall track, around that area, there were 2,100 operations. So we did way more than half of those operations. We did almost 3/4 of those operations in 3 days. It was so cool. I had Michael Dell as a client. I had Lieutenant Governor Abbott, who's now the governor. And for those of you who don't know, we had to make special commendations for him because he's wheelchair bound, and we were making sure that he was traveling okay. We had Governor Perry traveling with us. He had to be in a twin engine helicopter. We had Mario Andretti and McDreamy and all sorts of people flying with us during that period of time. And it was, we had 0 safety incidents, but we had all sorts of customer service issues. We had our operations company who was going to handle all the operations and all the communications for us, just backed out 3 days before. I didn't even have walkie-talkies because they were going to bring all of that. So I had to do all of that. The day before operations started, air traffic control at Austin decided that we couldn't fly over the Austin airport, which is pretty normal, but that we had to fly all the way around. So for every trip from downtown, it added 20 minutes, which is an additional 20 minutes of fuel burn, which in helicopters isn't cheap. So there were a number of huge obstacles that we had during that time, and we had to prioritize safety over profitability. So while it was a win from doing something really exciting and big and making it safe, it was a big loss financially for me. And it was pretty devastating. And just the stress of all of it. It was the weekend before Thanksgiving. I went to bed Sunday night and I don't even think I brushed my teeth for 2 days. I definitely didn't get out of my pajamas for 2 days. I mean, it was like a big letdown. And so highs and lows with entrepreneurship, you have to be able to handle the risk, and you've got to be able to pull yourself back out of bed the next day and put your feet on the floor, or maybe 2 days later, put your feet on the floor and get going and do the right thing and make sure that your employees are cared for. I mean, yeah, it seems exciting to be the boss, but all the weight rests on your shoulders. During COVID, at the beginning of COVID, with people not traveling, with hotels not open, with people not even leaving their houses, of course, no one's buying an airplane. So being in a panic with, how am I going to keep the doors open to my business? How am I going to pay my employees? And then hearing about PPP, the payroll protection plan, and all of the things with that. And, is there something about this that's going to bite me in the back, and really weighing out what would I do with this? What would I not do with this? How do I help my business recover from this completely unknown thing? That's a lot of weight on your shoulders, and carrying that weight for yourself and your employees while being concerned about the health of your family and your extended family is weighty. So I think that being an entrepreneur, while there's some aspects of it that are glamorous, and I get to do so many cool things and meet so many interesting people, there are also parts that are very weighty responsibilities. I hate firing people. Sometimes you have to do it. I hate taking out loans, but sometimes you have to do it. I hate throwing in the towel on things, but sometimes that's the best choice. And so, you've got to have thick skin and a pretty strong emotional fortitude to be able to be an entrepreneur successfully.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people don't realize you take it home with you. You never escape it. There are days, I mean, I laugh. There are days I'd love to go be a Walmart greeter, but just go home at the end of the day and turn it off and not worry about work anymore. But it goes with you everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm not a successful Walmart greeter. I would be annoyed after about an hour.
Well, good, because you need to keep doing what you're doing. I mean, the other thing to think about is that you can be successful with turning things off, but you have to design that. So I know the first time I really planned a vacation where I wasn't going to be working at all, I had to give up some control. I had to give my assistant access to my email and say, I need you to check my email every day. And if these 3 catastrophes happen, I need you to call me. And if otherwise, just respond to everyone and tell them, just let them get the out of office reply, or respond and say, hey, I can help you with this in Renee's absence. But then I did it on a larger scale 2 years ago, and I set myself up to be redundant in my company. I had parsed out all of my responsibilities to other people so that I could take a 1-month sabbatical and get my pilot's license. And I did that. I mean, I was 12 to 14 hours a day focused on learning how to fly.
Wow.
I got my pilot's license in 4 weeks. And I was able to do that because I was the business owner, and I spent a year designing that sabbatical so that I could take that time off. So there are ways to get yourself out of that trap of being constantly on, but you can only do that by design.
Yep, I agree. Tell me about making Charlie Bravo a woman-owned business. I remember when you kind of called me and were talking to me about doing that, and you've shared some of your stories and experiences with that.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and it's such an integral part of my story. Thanks for asking about that. So Kurt and I, my husband and I, started Charlie Bravo in 2008. And my intention, our kids were 13 and 16 at the time. And my intention was to just help out a little bit with marketing because I love that, and to run payroll, which wouldn't be that complicated with 2 employees. And so that's what I was doing. And I was still doing PTA and being the basketball mom and the volleyball mom and all those things. And one of our clients who happened to work for Lockheed Martin at the time said, gosh, it would be really beneficial if you were certified as a woman-owned company. And so Kurt and I called our attorney, and he's like, yeah, just, you're 50-50 partners. Renee would own 51%. Kurt, you would own 49%. Done. And we were like, okay, sign us up. So we signed up, and our friend Steve said, hey, you've got to, go through this WeBank organization in order to get certified as a woman-owned company. I'm like, okay, send in all the paperwork. They're like, nope. And I'm like, I'm a woman. What do you mean, nope? Like, I got all the body parts. I'm a woman. Like, what do you mean? And they said, well, you have to be a woman enterprise, a woman-led, not just woman-owned, but woman-led organization. I'm like, and how do you find that? And they said, well, you have to have the highest title. You have to have the highest pay. You have to have the most legal authority. You have to be the leader of the business. And I'm like, okay, well, we're kind of pot committed at this point. So I'm just going to step in those shoes and see if my feet can grow into those. And so I took the CEO title. I gave myself a raise. I was probably already signing more things legally than Kurt was anyhow. And I stepped out in those shoes into the industry as the CEO, and I began to gain respect in that area. And our friend Debbie and others were so helpful in teaching me the things that I needed to know to be successful in the industry. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of this call, I constantly was looking for ways to grow my leadership skills. And so really did serve, after about 6 or 8 months, did serve as the CEO of the company, was able to do a lot of things with that, not just from a perspective of gaining business and having that be a brand differentiator, but really stepping out and being a role model to other women in the industry by being able to say, you know what, I took a chance, and yeah, it's been really hard, but it's paid off. And I want to teach you how to do this too. I want to help you along. Who can I introduce you to? What sounding board do you need me to be for you to take a step forward in your leadership? And Tracy, I honestly think that's part of the reason that I was selected to be part of that FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board. It's always a hand up instead of stomping on the person who's trying to climb the ladder behind me, stomping on their fingers on the ladder. It's always, how do we pull more women up so that, or more entrepreneurs up so that we have a robust industry culture?
Yeah. But you can't be threatened, right, by other people's success in order to do that. You almost have to have, not almost, but you really have to have a, not growth. What's the abundance mentality, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If you have a scarcity mindset, like there's only room for 10 women here, then you're not going to be a friend to any of those women.
Right.
But if you're embracing other people, there is so much success to be had. And just when we think, oh my gosh, this is the top company, there's some other company that does something totally new, right? So when there's collaboration and generosity, there's innovation, and we come up with more ways to be successful. Success can be infinite.
Right. It doesn't feel that way sometimes, I'll just say. But
that's because you're looking too small. You're looking down instead of looking broadly.
Right. Which I think as an entrepreneur, you can get pigeonholed into your day-to-day. It goes back to what you were talking about earlier. You got to look up quarterly, daily. You have to prioritize your goals. You have to look at, it's just like when you're walking along and you just look up and you're like, oh, where did I go? Or I'm bad when I'm driving and I zone out and I kind of come back in. I'm like, where am I? I've not been paying attention to where I'm going. So, I mean, I think it's the same concept, right?
Exactly.
You have to look up periodically. Um, so we talked about COVID, and it was scary. I mean, did Charlie Bravo? How did you guys survive that?
Well, the first 6 months of COVID, we sold one airplane. So that was scary. We did apply for and receive PPP, and we used it properly. Just for any IRS person that's listening out there, we did use it properly. We did use our local bank for that, and it was a great experience, and it was much needed to be able to stay afloat during that time. But since then, we've done what we've always done, and that's provide great amounts of information, free information to the market. If you go out and Google lots of different things to do with private aviation, there will be a lot of boxes that pop up and a lot of search engines that produce Charlie Bravo results. And so we kept doing our marketing. We kept reaching out to the market. We kept talking to people and educating first-time buyers, of which there are a lot more now. But we kept doing what had granted us success in the past. And just that repetitiveness and that continuity helped us to thrive in the second half of the year. So even though we had a dismal first and second quarter, by the end of the third quarter, we had sold aircraft to 3 or 4 brand new buyers who had never owned an aircraft before. And we ended up with a good year in 2020, a better year in 2021, and an even better year in 2022. So the keeping the momentum going, even when you felt like you were spinning your wheels, I think was key in surviving COVID.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of our competitors have a similar story. So it wasn't rocket science there. It was, we've seen the ups and downs in this market or this industry before. And those who stick it out, those who've built a little bit of cushion for themselves and built some good business practices, survive the upticks and the downturns.
Right. I don't disagree with that, but I do think COVID was unprecedented. So it was a little bit more than your standard up and down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when did you say you started Charlie Bravo? In 2008?
In February of 2008, actually. So we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary. But yeah, right before the big.
Right. Speaking of ups and downs, that one, the 2008 hit the aviation space pretty hard too.
Yeah, 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
It was tough. So we started in February. We didn't sell our first plane, didn't close on our first plane until November.
Oh, wow.
So it was oh, wow, what did we do? What kind of mistake did we make? Should we move into an apartment and sell our house? Like, it was scary. But once we got through that, it started feeling a little bit more comfortable and like, wow, if we could overcome that, then I think we could make it through anything. And so it's a kind of a little bit like we jumped off the high dive into the deep end. But once we figured out that we could tread water and then we could actually swim to the side, I feel like we had been seasoned pretty well. We were definitely naive when we started that company because I had marketing experience and Kurt had sales experience, but neither one of us were really good at running a company. So that was a on-the-job training that was not always very comfortable.
Well, right. But that's that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. I think so many people, if they knew what it was really about, wouldn't necessarily take it. I mean, I think truly successful entrepreneurs do that. They learn on the fly. They build the airplane in the air. That's the best way to learn. You can do your business plan and you can build it all out. But once you start, it's not going to follow the plan.
Yeah, there are all sorts of unknowns.
That's almost a guarantee that it won't follow the plan. So,
really, how many people set as their is there, if you choose a word for the beginning of the year, when you start a year, some people say like growth is their word. How many people set vision as their word for 2020? And then round about March 1st, we're like, I can't see anything. What in the world is going on? Right? It's like 2020 vision. This is going to be a year of expansion or not drowning.
Right.
I mean, you just never know. Never know.
One or the other. So my next question is, business owners who are and entrepreneurs who are the face of the business, which you have been the face of Charlie Bravo, have to develop a personal brand. Whether you want to be in sales and marketing or not, if you're going to be a small business owner, you need to be in sales and marketing, but you need to do more than just promote your business. You need to develop a personal brand. I personally think you are a master of that. I've watched you do it for years. And I would love to learn a little bit more, or have you talk a little bit more about how you develop a personal brand, what you think about it, all that.
Yeah, this was a process for me, and I'll actually take you through the process with some practical steps so you can do this for yourself. But one of my best friends has always said, it's not what you sell, it's what you stand for that determines your success. And she was selling, when she started saying that pretty regularly to the press, she was selling Fiats in Austin, Texas. And for any of you who don't live in Texas or Oklahoma, pickup trucks are much more common than little Italian cars. And she had a determination that she was going to take a rather ragtag group of salespeople who were not your traditional 40-year-old sleazy, used car salesman type. And she was going to build something completely different with this group of millennials with tattoos, and one of her salespeople was homeless, and that she was going to get them to sell more Fiats than any dealership in the country. And she did it. But she did it not because she was selling Fiats in Austin, Texas, but because of what her business stood for. And that was equipping the underdog. And so it was all about equipping these people with what would make them successful in life, and then equipping the community with what would make the community successful. And so it's not what you sell, it's what you stand for. And in order to figure out what you stand for, I like to tell people to do this exercise. So you get out a piece of paper, or 2 or 3 pieces of paper, and a pen or a pencil. Don't do it on your notes. Actually physically write it. And then use your phone and set a timer for 30 minutes. And then fill in the blank on this sentence: I believe. So you might say, I believe the underdog needs a chance. I believe you can sell Fiats in North America, which, maybe is or isn't the case. But you go through, like, what are your core beliefs? Well, when I was going through it, I was like, I believe that women can succeed in aviation as well as men can. I believe I was created for a purpose. I believe that mediocrity is robbing this country of its greatest gifts. So I was going through all this philosophical stuff when I first did this exercise. And I discovered, like, after 5 minutes, I was like, I'm kind of out of ideas. And then I'm like, no, let me keep going. I believe America is the greatest country on earth. I believe that the Statue of Liberty stands for something. I believe that a handshake means something. Like, I just kept going. And when I finished, when the timer went off at 30 minutes, I went back and circled the things that I believe in. And that happened for me in 2015. And then in 2016, I wrote a book. In 2016, I also began doing business coaching. I finished my undergrad degree. I started reaching out to people in the business college at my alma mater. I started sowing into the next generation. And from that, I really built a personal brand. So the beginning of it was being a woman-owned business, but
Mm-hmm.
then it was, what do I do with that? Like, what's my purpose in being a woman-owned business? And it went from really wanting to gain more business using that to, what does it mean when I stand for other women in this industry? And so that's really, if you go look at all of my branding now and you look at my personal brand and you look at my professional brands, you'll see that as a theme. Like, I really want to bring excellence to this industry. And I believe that you bring excellence by listening to more than just the same old voices that have been in this industry for a long time. And you see that reflected in everything that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see a few pictures of my grandkids and some flying videos too, because those are pretty cool. But those are passions, right? It's not my personal brand, but it is part of my persona.
That's awesome. I was taking notes. That's great.
Good.
I'm going to do that exercise.
Good. Well, then you look at, so you take your I beliefs, you come up with your core themes, whatever those are. And then from that, you select what your values are. So if my values are excellence, and integrity, and humility, how do I filter everything that I post and the way that I present myself through that lens? Is it true to my core values?
Awesome.
So that's my spiel on personal branding, but it's really getting clear with who you are and what you stand for,
Right.
and then everything else flows naturally from that.
Very good. That was awesome. That was an awesome tidbit. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Great.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll ask again, and maybe we can dive a little bit deeper. You're a coach now, but prior to that, what role did coaching or peer groups play in your career? I think you talked about developing goals and challenging yourself, but is there more you can talk about that role and how that helped you get where you are today?
Oh my gosh, Tracy, I can't even think of where I'd be without coaching. I think what a coach does for you is they see potential in you, either because they've been there or they've coached other people. And sometimes a coach can see our blind spots, like what's holding us back. But oftentimes a coach or a coaching type manager can see something in us that maybe we can't see around the corner to realize that it could come true yet. And, this was true for me early in my career when I had a boss identify how good I was at networking, and not just for myself, but at connecting two people to bring forth something great. That also has been coached later in my life. And I've been able to do some pretty phenomenal things with that, introduce people who have been able to change the world, which is amazing. But those two things, right? Coaches expose blind spots, and they also highlight areas of opportunity for you. And then they help you get out of your own way in getting to those areas. So one of the things that Michael, as my coach, did was say, well, what do you believe about that? Well, why do you believe that you can't have a budget? Well, because my income's variable. Well, that doesn't mean you can't have a budget. You can still have a budget. You may or may not exactly operate within that budget in any given month, but you can still create a budget, which will give you a framework for taking your finances to the next level. And lo and behold, when I went through Dave Ramsey's course and I set up a budget and I started eliminating debt, sure enough, things lined up and the money seemed to organize itself better. It was me organizing it better, but it was one of those limiting beliefs that I thought I couldn't have a budget because I didn't have a steady income as a business owner. So, and we've already talked about this, the ebbs and flows of feast or famine in the aviation sales business is stark sometimes. So getting rid of limiting beliefs is helpful. Making connections. Gosh, coaching. I've introduced so many people to great service providers or vendors or new thoughts or new books. And they were like, oh my gosh, I made $1 million more in my business last year as a result of your coaching. Or I increased my employee satisfaction by 50% with this one tweak in the way that I communicate. And so being a coach is powerful because you get to observe things and ask questions and let other people do the work, and you get to celebrate with them. But receiving coaching is the exact same. And it's, I don't think I'll ever go without coaching now, just because it's been so instrumental in helping me literally get wings, not spread my wings, but get wings, right? Get my pilot's license, buy an airplane, fly myself.
So you still have a coach now, even though you are a coach?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. In fact, I have coaches for different things, right? I have a marketing coach and I have a health and wellness coach. I have an overall business coach. I have a counselor. I mean, I believe in allowing other people to speak into my life. And when I'm paying them, they're paid to hold me accountable, which is one of the biggest reasons that people don't accomplish things. So they're not being held accountable for their results unless they have a boss. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're your own boss.
That's right.
So you have to coach yourself or hire a coach.
Right. That's good. That's really good. So if you could give advice to entrepreneurs or people thinking of taking the leap of faith, what would you tell them?
Get organized, get advisors, have measurable goals, and then give yourself credit for partial achievement. So if I have a goal to make $1 million and I only hit 950,000, I shouldn't be saying, dang it, I didn't hit my goal, I'm a failure. Because hello, 950,000 is great progress. So giving yourself partial credit is really good. And you don't know if you get partial credit if you don't set measurable goals.
Right.
So measurable goals are really important. Partial credit's very important. Having advisors, either whether that's a personal advisory board or a business advisory board or a business coach, or just a friend who you share accountability with, an accountability partner, is really important. And then celebrate those wins because they're tough sometimes.
They are tough. They are. Hey, I forgot to ask you about imposter syndrome. Have you ever dealt with it? What'd you do about it? How do you?
Imposter syndrome? What's that, Tracy? You've never heard of it. You know what I tell? I coach some students at Ohio University, and we talked through this a couple of months ago, and I said the best way to overcome imposter syndrome, and they were like, yeah, get their pens out, they're ready to take notes, and I'm like, fail, and they're like, that's not really what we wanted to hear. It's true. Yeah. Right? If you don't feel like you belong in a room, but like you've paid the dues to be there, right? You accepted that you were offered and accepted the job. You were invited to be a part of something. There's a reason for you to be there. And so taking a risk and failing and then picking yourself back up and taking another risk and failing is the best way to gain confidence. And confidence is what helps you overcome imposter syndrome. And it's not something that you just get to brush away. And I think a lot of millennials think like, well, I'm just going to talk my way out of imposter syndrome. No, it has to come from deep within you that you have the confidence that, and I approach it from I try to approach it. I won't say that I'm humble, but I try to be humble, and I try to approach it with hey, I'm going to bring something unique to this room, and I'm going to expect that everybody else has some other areas of expertise that I don't know enough about. And so I'm going to bring my best self, and I'm going to try to learn something from everybody else, and not coming in feeling like I need to have all the answers, but that I've been selected to be there for a particular reason, because I bring a particular skill set and feeling comfortable in that skill set, mostly by failing and trying again, I approach the room a little bit differently. And that confidence is what defeats imposter syndrome. Now, defeats is probably a good word for it, because I don't think it ever gets completely obliterated. And if it does, then it's a false arrogance that people have, or a blind arrogance that people have, because there's always going to be someone in the room that knows something that you don't know, that might be really valuable. So building confidence through failure and trying again, and then also being curious, are two strong ways to at least kick imposter syndrome down the road.
Yeah, that's good. And I love how you talked about failure, and failure is just a part of growth. There's just no way around it. And I think in our society, it's not being taught in schools. We're protecting kids from failure. Parents are protecting kids from failure because it's awful and it's so hard to watch your kids fail. But they're not learning how to fail. That's been happening for a long, long time. And you get out in the real world, if you don't know how to fail, you don't know how to succeed. People don't understand.
Right. And, John Maxwell said this. I'm not going to say it was an original idea, but you don't learn from your successes. You learn from your failures. So if you want to be bigger, if you want to grow, if you want to expand, if you want to conquer something, you have to be willing to fail. And failure isn't permanent, right? You fail, you learn, you grow. The only true failure is something that you refuse to grow from or refuse to learn from. Like my big financial loss with my helicopter venture made me realize that I want to be super cautious about how I approach any new helicopter venture. And I want to take all those expensive lessons and apply them to any venture that I do. Like what are my vulnerabilities in any venture? I look at that a lot harder now, because I had quite a few of them there that I didn't anticipate, and they cost me a lot of money.
Yeah. It makes you a little bit more careful about chasing shiny objects.
There's that too.
I mean, that's been my lesson is, okay, that was not a good shiny object to go follow. It was shiny, it was pretty, but it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, failing quickly is also a good.
Yeah,
it's also a good cutting your losses, saying, you know what, nope, that's not going to work. Pitch it out the window. That's a good way. But one of the things that I coach people through is when they're thinking about a big risk, I say, okay, what are all the good things that could happen? What are all the bad things that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Okay, well, what would happen if the worst happened? Well, then what would happen? And it seems when you start saying, then what, like they get to the point where they're like, you know what, it's probably worth the risk. And so being able to go down that path of, oh, what would be the worst? And then when the worst doesn't happen, you're like, oh, well, this is a partial win. That's good. I can grow from this. So approaching it from like, it's not a pass fail. Like we don't have pass fail grades in life. Right. And sometimes if we're average in something, it's not going on a report card. It's a place where we can learn to be a little bit better next time.
So if you had done that exercise with a helicopter venture, would you have done it?
I would have done things a lot differently.
Right.
I would have done things a lot differently. And frankly, the biggest part of my operational problem was that the track breached contract with me. They had contractually given me the first right of refusal to all landing spots. And that's not what happened. And so I think in retrospect, I probably should have sued them.
Oh.
Because I think that I could have recouped some of that. And I had fought to have that in the contract, and then I didn't hold myself to it. But I think I probably could have had a really good case, and at least save face with some of my clients, because I took the kick in the teeth, and instead of casting blame where the blame actually lay.
Yeah. That's a good lesson. It's a hard lesson, but it's a good lesson.
But yeah, I stand up for myself a little bit better now.
See, even a better lesson. Yeah,
Yeah.
that one's been a hard one for me, learning to stand up for myself and saying no. Well, thank you so much today for sharing your story with us today. If you are interested in learning more about René, you can visit her website at theaviationcollective.com. And if you have your own story you'd like to share, you can email me at info@optimize.marketing. We are looking for entrepreneurs anytime, anywhere, so that we can learn more about their stories. Thank you so much, René. It was wonderful.
Oh, thanks, Tracy. I appreciate you inviting me to be part of this. And thanks so much for what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.